Pulse Talk, bringing insights into health and wellness with your hosts, Christine and Alex.
All right, so you've been managing some long-term health conditions, and you're curious about generic medications versus the brand name ones. You sent over a whole bunch of research and articles, so we're going to try to extract the most important stuff for you. Really, this is something that affects a lot of people. One of the articles even mentions patients asking things like, my drug isn't working the same since I switched brands, or can I try that cheaper generic to save some money? Clearly, this is a topic where people want, clear answers.
It definitely is. Yeah, it makes sense, especially when you're dealing with chronic conditions and medications you rely on day in and day out.
Exactly. It's not just a one-time thing. It's about your long-term health well-being. So let's break this down. First things first, can you remind us what exactly we mean by innovator drug and generic drug?
Of course. The innovator drug is the original, the first one to hit the market. It's usually under patent protection, giving that company exclusive rights to sell it for a while. Think of it like a new invention. They've invested heavily in research and development to bring it to life.
Okay, so like the big blockbuster movie that gets to be the only show in town for a bit. But then what happens? The patent expires, right?
Right. That's when generic drugs enter the scene. They contain the same active ingredient as the innovator drug, but they're made by different companies. It's like having the same great song, but performed by a different band.
I get it.
Yeah.
So like with those everyday painkillers,
Yeah.
You've got your big name brands, and then you've got the generic paracetamol. Same active ingredient, different packaging, usually a big difference in price. Which, speaking of, that's the million-dollar question, right? Why are generics so much cheaper? Does that mean they're skimping on quality?
That's a concern a lot of people have. But the answer is no, not at all. The key difference lies in the research and development. The R&D. Developing a new drug is incredibly expensive. We're talking years of research clinical trials, a whole lot of hurdles to jump through. In fact, one of the sources mentioned that out of 10,000 compounds tested, only one ends up getting approved as a new drug. That's a pretty wild success rate, or lack thereof.
1 out of 10,000. Wow, that puts things into perspective. No wonder those innovator drugs carry a hefty price tag. They've got to make up for all those failed attempts.
Exactly. But with generics, those initial R&D costs are out of the picture. They're essentially building upon the work that's already been done.
So they can afford to offer lower prices and still make a profit.
Precisely. And that's a huge advantage for consumers, especially those who need medications long term. One study we looked at highlighted the massive growth of the generic drug market in the U.S. Back in 1990, it was worth about $2.6 billion. But get this, by 2005, it was projected to hit $16 billion. That's a pretty incredible jump, and it shows how many people are turning to generics.
That makes a lot of sense, especially when you think about someone managing a chronic condition. Those costs can really add up over time, but I imagine there's still that lingering question. If it's so much cheaper, is it really as good?
It's a valid question for sure, but the truth is generic drugs have to meet the same stringent standards for safety, quality, and effectiveness as the original brand name drug. Here in Malaysia, the National Pharmaceutical Control Bureau, the NPCB, is responsible for making sure all medications, generic or branded, meet these standards.
So it's not like they're getting a free pass just because they're generic.
Not at all. They go through rigorous testing to prove they're bioequivalent to the brand name counterpart.
Bioequivalent, what exactly does that mean?
It means the generic drug has to deliver the active ingredient into your bloodstream at the same rate and in the same amount as the brand name drug. Think of it like baking a cake. The recipe is the same, but slight variations in the ingredients or oven temperature can affect the final result. With bioequivalence, we're looking for that consistent cake, so to speak. The FDA actually requires that a generic drug performs within 80% to 125% of the brand name drug's performance. They're looking for very similar results in how the body absorbs and uses the medication.
So it's not just about having the same active ingredient. It's about how your body processes it, making sure it's essentially the same experience as taking the brand name.
You got it. Now you might be wondering, well, what about those inactive ingredients, the stuff that's not the main active ingredient? And that's a fair question. Inactive ingredients like fillers, binders, and dyes can vary between generics and brand names. Sometimes this leads to slight differences in how the drug looks or even how it feels when you swallow it.
Right. I've definitely noticed that some generics look different from the brand name pills I was used to.
Absolutely. But the important thing to remember is that the FDA's strict bioequivalence standards ensure these variations in inactive ingredients won't cause any significant difference in how the drug works in your body.
Okay, that's reassuring. It seems like those safeguards are in place to ensure that generics truly are a comparable option.
Exactly. And this is especially important for people on long-term medications managing those chronic conditions.
You're right. I mean, if you're taking something every day for years, you want to be absolutely sure it's doing what it's supposed to.
Couldn't agree more. And while bioequivalence testing is incredibly important, it's not the only factor to consider when choosing a generic. One of the articles you sent mentioned something called secondary attributes.
Secondary attributes. That sounds intriguing. What are we talking about here?
Think of it like this. You're comparing two cars. Both get you from point A to point B. But one might have extra features, a better sound system, maybe it's a bit more fuel efficient. With medications, secondary attributes are those additional factors that might influence your choice, even if the core function, the active ingredient, is the same.
Okay, so like those car features, what are some examples of these secondary attributes when it comes to generic medications?
One key attribute is the quality systems of the manufacturer. Are they ISO certified? This means they meet international standards for quality management. Do they comply with current good manufacturing practices? Or CGMP? That ensures they're following strict guidelines for manufacturing processes.
So basically you want to make sure they're top-notch and following all the best practices.
Precisely. Another important factor, especially here in Malaysia, is the availability of stability data for our specific climate conditions.
Right. Because Malaysia is hot and humid.
Yeah.
You want to be sure the medication can handle that without losing its effectiveness. I remember once I left some vitamins in my car and they basically melted into a gooey mess.
Exactly. It's important to note that the medication has been tested to ensure it remains stable and effective in our unique tropical environment. And beyond the scientific side, there are also practical considerations.
Like what?
Things like packaging preferences. Some people might prefer tablets over capsules. Or maybe they have a sensitivity to certain dyes. And of course, there's the matter of availability and delivery. Is the generic readily stocked at your pharmacy? Can you easily get refills? These things matter, especially if you rely on regular medication.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just about the science. It's about finding medication that fits into your life.
Absolutely. And remember, choosing a generic doesn't mean you're getting a subpar product. There are high-quality generics out there. And by considering these secondary attributes, you can make informed choices that prioritize both your health and your peace of mind.
This is really helpful. I think a lot of people, myself included, might have had some misconceptions about generics. It's great to hear that they go through such rigorous testing and that there are ways to really ensure you're getting a good quality option.
I'm glad to hear that. It's all about empowering consumers with knowledge so they can make the best decisions for their health.
Speaking of empowering consumers, one of the articles mentioned that there needs to be open communication between patients, pharmacists, and doctors.
That's crucial, especially when you're managing long-term conditions. Your healthcare team should be aware of your preferences and concerns. If you're thinking about switching to a generic money, have a conversation with your doctor and pharmacist. They can answer your questions, address any concerns, and help you make an informed decision.
So it's a team effort, really.
Exactly. It's about finding the best fit for your individual needs and circumstances. And that often involves a collaborative approach.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. If you were to boil it down to the key takeaways for our listeners, what would you say?
First and foremost, generic medications offer significant cost savings without compromising quality, safety, or effectiveness. They undergo rigorous testing to ensure they're bioequivalent to their brand name counterparts, so you can be confident you're getting the same therapeutic benefit.
And beyond the price and the science, remember to consider those secondary attributes, the manufacturer's reputation stability data in our Malaysian climate, and even personal preferences like packaging or availability. It sounds like taking that extra bit of time to do your research and chat with your healthcare providers can make a big difference.
Absolutely. It's about being an informed consumer and advocating for your health.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground on the individual level, but I'm curious, what about the bigger picture? One of the articles touched upon the broader impact of generic medications on the healthcare system as a whole.
That's a great point. Yeah, the shift towards generics has the potential to significantly impact healthcare economics and resource allocation. Think about it. If more people are using cost-effective generics, it can free up resources that can be directed towards other areas like research and development of new drugs, improving access to healthcare for underserved populations, or even lowering overall healthcare costs.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like a ripple effect, starting with individual savings and potentially leading to positive changes throughout the entire system.
Exactly. It's a complex issue with a lot of moving parts. But it's exciting to consider the possibilities.
It really is. As we wrap up this deep dive, I have one final thought I want to leave our listeners with. We've talked a lot about the now of generic medications, how they work, why they're cheaper, how to choose wisely. But what about the future? Where do you see the world of generics heading?
That's a fantastic question. I think we'll see continued innovation in the development and manufacturing of generics. There's always room for improvement in terms of formulation delivery methods and even personalized medicine approaches.
Personalized medicine with generics. That sounds fascinating.
It is. Imagine tailoring generic medications to an individual's specific genetic makeup or lifestyle factors. It could revolutionize how we approach treatment and optimize outcomes.
Wow. That's definitely something to ponder. So as our listeners continue their journey toward informed healthcare decisions, we encourage you to not only think about the choices you're making today, but also envision the future of generics and how it might impact your health and the healthcare landscape as a whole. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of generic versus branded medications.